This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and Ewen McKenzie. A few days past now since the draw for the 2027 Men's Rugby World Cup. There, as always seems to be the case, some controversy, but your reflections on the draw, particularly the criticism that, potentially South Africa will play the All Blacks in a quarterfinal if the rankings go to form. What's your views about that, about the draw?
I mean, I was probably more taken aback by how they did the draw, but I've looked at it pretty closely and made notes and whatever. But there's a bunch of in the quarterfinals. There's a bunch of potentially key games. So yes, everyone talks about New Zealand, South Africa, but Argentina, Ireland's another potential one. So that's So you're clearing the decks early. I don't think you can. There's a lot of teams that are competitive at the moment, so you've got more than. It's very hard just to line up 2 years out 4 teams into the semi-finals. You know what I mean? There's going to be some pain somewhere. It would be disappointing if that was the case, but that's the nature of the tournament. There's always been that way, and so you just got to run with it. That's the point of the tournament. So I don't think you can manipulate the result unless you just handpick it based on the rankings, and just distribute the top. But where do you start and stop with that? You could just take the top X 24 teams and just place them into a tournament, but you'd still get problems. We're still going to have issues in 2 years' time because the rankings will change again between now and then. I believe that's what happens every year because we go early. We just, obviously just been swamped by the Soccer World Cup draw with Trump and the whole lot. So there are other things going on, but they do theirs 1 year out, I think. So it's a bit different. We're 2 years out. You're prone to problems. So we'll see what the rankings are, see what it looks like then. There might be more important other games going on, So I don't see any easy pathway into the semis anyway for anyone.
Mm. Eddie Jones, what's your thoughts a couple of days hence?
Well, I haven't read any of that stuff, so I wouldn't know, but I find it a bit mystical that when you get down to the last day, they should be tough games, shouldn't they? What do we expect? Yeah, and I think that's a bit of an old-fashioned view. Like, if you go back probably 15, 20 years in the World Cup, the quarterfinals weren't difficult games. But now, the depth of World Rugby's increased, and that's what we want. So we want games that really test opponents. So I think it's fantastic for the tournament. Obviously not potentially fantastic for Ireland, who I imagine are the ones who's complaining.
But what about that idea of like tennis seedings? Was, as you and McKenzie outlined, you grab 1 to 24, and you make sure that the number one's on one end of it, and number two's at the other end, and the only place that they can end up is against each other in the final.
Well, I think we've got the bandings. The bandings give you that. Yeah, the bandings give you the balance in the draw, but with anything you're going to have a few discrepancies. So I wouldn't like to see us go down the seeding because the seeding's too temporary too. The rankings of the teams, we play another set of games next weekend and the rankings change again. So it's not like tennis where they do it over a long period of time, and if you get an injury in tennis, you can still be ranked in the top 20 for a period of time. But that's not the case in rugby. So I don't think that sort of system would work in rugby.
Mm-hmm. I think, Pemby, the other point is that they're trying to grow the tournament, so you add more teams. You sort of got to expect that there's going to be bigger games further down the competition. That's just logic says that, So you're going to have harder games earlier in the competition. That's the point of having more teams in there. Yes, you'll get some bigger scores in the initial pool stuff, but after that, you only grow the competition because you think you've got more competitive teams to give them an opportunity. So I think that's sort of logic says it's going to be that way. You're going to get pretty tough games earlier in the comp.
Mm. And I did speak to Brett Robinson post the draw last week, and he did tell me that, in fact, the draw has been held later than it was done previously. And for the first time, we actually knew who all of the teams were being selected. So rather than, Pacific qualifier 3 equals so-and-so. So we've now got through the qualification. We've now done it later than previously. So in terms of incremental improvements, you'd have to give World Rugby some marks for improvement on that. But anyway, it will be what it will be, and certainly a tournament that we can all look forward to in 2027. Eddie Jones, actually, what do international rugby coaches do when the season is over? What are you up to at the moment, and how are you thinking and planning and doing whatever it is that you're up to at the moment?
We've got the board reports, mate. I've got a couple of board reports this week where you sit in front of a board and you're either trying to keep them happy, keep them informed, something like that. It's a painful exercise, but you got to do it. So that takes up a bit of time getting that report together. And then, you're reviewing your staff, you're reviewing what you did during the season, start thinking about, right, what are we going to look at next year? What are we going to change? What are we going to keep? So just the normal review process.
Okay. And so when you're reporting to the board, what questions are they likely to ask? And obviously you put forward a plan at some point and said, okay, this is what we're hoping to achieve for this next period. And is it a matter of just going through that plan and you saying, well, in terms of performance, we aimed for this and we got that? Player development, what other sorts of questions might you expect when you face the Japanese rugby board?
Well, take Japan out, but just take a board. There'll be one person who thinks they can coach. There'll be one person who thinks they can select.
Only one.
There'll be one person there who's worried about welfare. There'll be one person there worried about PR. And then there'll be a few that fall asleep. And it's the same everywhere in the world, mate.
Yeah, and there's one that's got their team and want to know why you didn't pick someone more often, or why you picked someone or didn't pick their mate from their club. It's standard fare. It's standard.
Or he sat next to Francois Pienaar or Dan Carter at a dinner, and he told him this. Why aren't you doing this? Yeah. That's a common story.
Yeah, and then why you need a selection panel, not the head coach picking it. That's another good one. Well, they say, oh, you shouldn't be the selector. We'll give you 5 other blokes that have nothing to do with it, training or anything, and they're going to pick the team for you.
Yeah, they don't watch the games.
Which includes a board member. Yeah.
I shouldn't have opened this box. You two are bitter and twisted.
Well, it's the same everywhere. It's the same everywhere.
Eddie, you've also been doing some junior development coaching stuff as well, I believe.
Yeah, no, it's been good being down in Oita, where they had the quarterfinals 2019. They had we took the young kids for a session, some high school kids, and then had coaches in, just trying to upskill them in terms of coaching. Because you think about, particularly a country like Japan, if you can upskill one coach, they can affect up to 30 kids. So just trying to share the knowledge a little bit. So it's been good, Just trying to keep the game alive, mate.
Excellent. Ewen McKenzie, Eben Etzebeth, since the last program, he has been suspended for 12 weeks, but he has been allowed to serve that 12 weeks through club football. Your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think I said it the other day when we were talking about the cards and whatever. I think you've got the penalty has to be in the jurisdiction. I believe that the offence occurred, and I think that way you can get some consistency across the yellow-red scenarios. So I believe that's the case. I know that'd be a harsh penalty, but that's what it is. I think that being able to serve it out in some sort of manufactured environment is not the ideal thing, because in the end he wouldn't probably play club rugby, right? So it's got to be in a forum that you would normally play. I would have thought, at least in a forum at a level. So it's got to be at least Super Rugby, not, it's got to be something where you would have actually been participating. So I think that's a bit, it's a bit of it becomes a slap on, a bit of a wet lettuce type.
Well, I think,
really,
by club, I do mean Sharks. I do mean the Manchester Sharks.
Okay. Yeah.
But I do also understand that there was a large period of it is going to be a rest period that the Springbok players will be forced to take during Super Rugby.
Yeah, and I've been in the hearings where you have these sort of discussions with the citing commissioner and whatever else, and they sit there and they hear it all out, and then they come up with a sanction, and they ask you to produce the playing calendar, and you give them the calendar about what games he might be playing, and they work it out. So they work from the other end. But I do think from a image point of view, you've got to be seen to be serving a proper sanction. So, it's a bit like getting community service. For some sort of significant crime. Anyway, to be honest, that's the way it's been done before. You get the benefits of all that, but it's got to be seen to be done correctly. So I guess if it's not, when you said club, I thought you meant club, but if it's at the super level, but they've got to do their best, and they'll be obviously trying to make him available for the World Cup, no doubt. So,
Eddie Jones, what's your thoughts?
I'm not surprised.
What's your thoughts about the serving of sanctions?
Well, he's a professional rugby player, so it's 100% right. He's been going to be forced to miss professional games. They're not counting games for Durbanville or Hamilton Boys or something like that, which we used to try to do. Play for Randwick on Saturday, play for Coogee Bay on Sunday. There's 2 games gone.
Yeah, I think that's the key. It's got to be done at the level he'd play at,
Eddie Jones, Rassie Erasmus has been appointed by the South African Rugby Union to take the team through to 2031. When you heard that news, what was your thoughts? Or have you heard that news? And what do you think about
it? He's obviously done a very good job. It seems like a sound appointment. He's been very good at changing his assistant coaches. And why would you want to leave that job, with the depth of players you got? It's a pretty attractive job. Yeah.
What about you and McKenzie? What do you think about 2031?
It's hard to get a long appointment in as a coach, so that's a pretty commendable effort. He's had his hands on the levers there for some time. Forget about what the job title's been. He's had his hands on the levers for some time, so it's really he's proved his worth, and he's proved he's capable of managing all the forces and the politics that goes with being at that level of any rugby organisation. So, and he's produced a very good succession plan for not only staff but also for the playing group. So, and he's been successful. So you can't begrudge him that, and I don't think they'll blow up in their face. Often you make a long appointment, it blows up in the administration's face. I don't think that'll happen, because he's been there and controlling the levers for some time now anyway. In whatever role he's been, whatever job title he's had, he's been running the show for some time.
Yeah, if I could just add there, Pemby, I think, before Rassie became the national head coach, he worked as the technical director or whatever term you want to give it, where he basically put in a development system for South African rugby. They have a national teams units that go around the schools, pick out the most talented players, make sure they're in proper S&C programs, make sure their progress is being monitored. So he's been lucky enough to put that system in place, which is obviously working pretty well. Just have a look at the young players coming through. So, as Ewan said, he's been involved in the whole system. So, it seems like a really, sound reappointment.
Yeah. No, he's certainly been very impressive so far. And let's see what he does bring to the game in 2026 as he heads to 2027, because that's certainly lots of work to do before 2031. Okay, it's time for our regular feature, which is your views, the view of the third voice. And the comments we have, at Sue Walsh says, many thanks to you all. I love your pods. At Luke Littlewood on Apple, he says, far and away the best rugby podcast out there. Find myself desperately refreshing the feed to catch up to the next. Hopefully it continues through the Rugby Championship and beyond. And here we are. So, yes, we will. And thank you very much, Luke, for that. We at WF Dog Collie on YouTube, we are so lucky to have this insight and access into Eddie as the coach of Japan. Thank you for your time, Eddie. And at Peter on TikTok, thanks for your podcast. You're a guy that brings an unbiased, straightforward opinion on broad-based rugby talk. It's refreshing. No problems at Peter. So, to the questions. Eddie Jones at Coat Knight wants to know, would you prefer to play France at the 2027 Rugby World Cup as the first or the second game?
I don't care, mate. We're going to play 1, 2 or 3. Yeah, it's no use hoping for things. The one thing that doesn't give you anything is hope. So whatever comes out, hopefully on the next episode of Neighbours, they can do a better, make it a bit more exciting when they pick the draw. So yeah, don't care, mate.
I'll answer for him. He wants to play him first.
Does he? And why? And why Ewen McKenzie? Why does he want to play them first?
Well, because he can have the world's longest preparation in there and go straight into that game. So you get the whole lead into the World Cup preparation to peak at that game. A second game would be you get a bit of a practice game before you play, but you can focus all your tactical preparation into the first game, which would be, and that's got more time. Once you get into the games, you haven't got as long to prepare, and you've got to start mixing players depending on the scheduling and things like that. So you get a clean run, and you hopefully get there with your best team first up.
Yeah,
and you catch them on the hop too.
Yeah. Just to add to what Ewan was saying there, I reckon I was just thinking about the travel involved in Australia. That a lot of the times maybe you're only going to have 2 proper days of training in the World Cup, given the amount of travel there's going to be. So, your ability to change tactics within the tournament's probably going to be a little bit more compromised because of that.
Yeah. Okay.
That won't affect South Africa, but I think it's I think the whole setup, like that's for me is in way more interesting than the draw, is how they're going to manage the tournament and where the games are and whether everyone's going to be flying everywhere or they're going to be based somewhere and playing, within a bus ride of their training, their base. That's a big difference to then if you got to fly to WA and then back and fly to Brisbane or Townsville or whatever, and everyone's flying all over the place, which would seem to be a far more costly exercise. So I can't believe that they wouldn't have these pools based somewhere for the first 3 games and just be having people literally on bus trips or very short, and that will make it easier. As Eddie says, if you've got to go to the airport, you lose a day. Well, it doesn't even if it's only a 1-hour flight, you just lose time by the time you go there and fiddle around with bags and then move to another venue to stay and et cetera, and you've got training. It's a lost day, so it's a lost training day in the end. So it does limit your preparation.
So, Eddie Jones, is there anything else from the draw that you looked at? Because that's an interesting point that, with the travel or the anticipated travel, there is going to be shorter preparation times to be able to adjust and amend tactical elements. Are there any other pieces of it that you've sort of thought about since the draw was made?
Well, the interesting thing is that probably, 2 of the more non-traditional cities, Melbourne and Adelaide, have got the most number of pool games. So you would think, going along with Ewan's potential line of thinking, that they're going to leave pools in one city or one geographical area. And again, if you look at the way they did the draw, they're obviously going to run it on a tight budget. So to minimise travel costs, maybe you could have all your games in one city or the city next to it. I think that's the interesting part of it now going forward.
Yeah, and we find out about that February the 3rd next year when all of those decisions are taken. And just going through the betting markets from Betfair, South Africa 9-4 favourites, New Zealand 7-2, France 9-2, England 5-1, Ireland 6-1, Australia 9-1, Argentina 20-1, Scotland 50-1, Fiji 80-1, and Wales 80-1. That was as far as I got through the pricing there.
I get some money on Argentina. That's a good bet.
Argentina at 20-1, Australia at 9-1.
Argentina.
What do you reckon, Eddie? You're not a big gambler, Eddie Jones, but if you go through those markets, where would you put your money?
Oh, well, the team that's beaten the top teams in the world regularly over the last 3 or 4 years outside the top four, as Ewan said, has been Argentina. Yeah, so to get through, you're going to have to knock off someone ahead of you. So, Argentina have got a track record, 20-1. Yeah, you'd be getting some cash on them. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we'll get back to the questions here, and a question from @Bunkershal1. Eddie Jones, and I don't know if this is the case, but I'm sure Japan does have an attack coach, but he says Japan does not have an attack coach. Kaisuke Saiwaki is available. Have you considered him for a role? You work together at Suntory. Would he be an option for you as an attack coach?
Well, I think you got the pronunciation wrong there.
Okay.
Sawaki.
Probably.
Sawaki, yeah.
Sawaki.
He's just finished at Cannon, but I think he's moving down the track of being a head coach. He wants to be a head coach rather than assistant coach.
Well, there we go. So question is answered. All right, Eddie Jones, we'll stay with you. What is your favourite rugby philosophy other than it's a game for all shapes and sizes? Is there a favourite philosophy you have when you are thinking about the game of rugby?
Well, the thing that always strikes me about rugby, and even more so, if a team's had a bad game, the next week the players and generally the coaches say, they ask the question, what's changed in the week? And it's generally we've kept the game simple, we got more physical, and we had a better result because of that. And I think, the great thing about rugby is it's such a complex game. It's really hard, for people outside the game to understand because you've got all these different contests. But the greatest probably aspect of coaching is how you make the game simple. How you make the game simple enough for the resources you got to play it effectively.
What about for you, Ewen McKenzie? What's your favourite rugby philosophy?
Yeah, I think that's Eddie's 100% on the right track there. It's a sophisticated game that affords lots of opportunity to play the game and prepare for the game in many different ways, and you can cover your weaknesses and you can expose your opposition weaknesses as well if you're good enough. It's really a challenge, as Eddie says, as to what you can do in a week, because effectively you have a week generally as a preparation cycle, is what you can do if you have a pre-season, which you don't normally get at test level, but you do get some sort of lead-in preparation into things like the World Cup. But it's what you can achieve in a week in a sophisticated game with lots of different things that you can toy with, what you can achieve in a week to be able to get that message across to the players so that they can remember it and produce it under pressure on the day. And it's that environment that I find the most interesting, the strategy of the potential strategy you can impart to your players to then try and produce that in the game. And it's all of that. There's a communication piece there. There's a skill learning aspect to go with that, to go with all you got to do, all of that in a week, and then add in things like travel and whatever, which a lot of other sports don't have that. Even you talk to AFL, they talk about the big trip to the West when they have to go and play over in Perth or something like that. Like it's a big deal. Like rugby's doing that all the time. Like it's just the travel and you don't even see it now. I've noticed you don't even the media doesn't even bother going to the airport anymore, and you don't see them walking in and out of the airport like you used to, especially at Super Rugby. And you used to see teams coming and going, so you got some idea that there's travel involved. You just see them. You turn the television on, there they are. They're in Durban or they're somewhere, And I just know that the complexity of just getting there. Forget about trying to play the game. There's just the complexity and the amount of people you've got to move and the equipment and whatever. All of that makes for a really interesting coaching experience because when you're coaching, you've got to manage. You're the leader of the group, and you'll have a general manager or whatever. But in the end, you're making the calls that affect the preparation and whatever. So there's a lot to take in any given week, and I think that's the beauty of the game at that level, And the other level, club level, you've got 2 nights a week. You're just trying to do the same thing. You're trying to you've got 2 nights a week to try and get them prepared to win a club game on the weekend and get enough knowledge into them and try and take on an opponent you probably play twice a year. So it's the reverse challenge, but the same principle. You're trying to keep it simple enough to be able to win on the weekend.
I'll stay with Ewen McKenzie, and it's the same question from Maven Run 1243 again, or second question that he asks, or she. What is the best emotion to tap into to get high performance? Is it that patriotism, national pride? Is it the brothers in arms? How do you think about emotions and tapping into emotions to get the best performances out of your team?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's a collective. Obviously, you've got to have it. And we're seeing. I'll use Japan as an example. You don't, as a collective group, you don't go out there and put your body on the line like we saw Japan do. The actual tackling. I'm not talking about defensive patterns. I'm talking about physically putting yourself in front of the opposition. And we saw some of the best tackling I've seen during the year. I mean, that still sticks in my mind. The Japanese hooker tackle on Robertson in that Test match. That you don't. There's skill and technique there, but there's attitude that goes with that, and that comes as a collective. So that's one way. But in the end, you got to prepare each individual separately, and each. Some people come to the game with a level of preparation and motivation and attitude. Others, you've got to help conjure that. So you're dealing with everyone individually, and same as you do with the communication. Some learn by seeing it, some learn by doing it, some learn by you showing them. So there's different ways of getting messages across, but it's the same with attitude. Some are super hyper motivated. Poitevin and these sort of guys, they just turned up and they were at it. Other guys, you got to sort of cajole them along a little bit, because in the end there's a lot of games, and so you don't want people pacing themselves. So you got to try and create some motivation in the environment for individuals and for the team to some extent, because they're living in the week to week. Sometimes you got to keep the broader context, make that aware what the broader context is. So it changes every week. Eddie's probably he's more current than me, but that's how I see it.
Eddie Jones, emotion. How do you manage it?
Well, just to add to it, Ewan's 100% right. I reckon the only thing I'd add to it was that from a country point of view, I think there's a certain psyche about each country that relates to their society, that if you can tap into that in the right way, you can sometimes get a bit more out of them, get them right for the game. Like, I always felt with Australian teams, they're at their best when they're attacking, but there's a certain smartness about them, which has been, if you think about Australia growing up, it was a lucky country. You get out there, you do your best, there'd be opportunities there, but you had to find the opportunities. And I reckon Australian rugby was always like that at its best. Like South Africa's always been a team that's prided itself on defence and aggression. And whenever they've gone away from that, tried to play lovely attacking rugby, they seem to lose a bit of that collectiveness. Because, as you made the point, you got individual players who you're trying to get on the same page with the same sort of feeling about playing the game. So I always find that's a little bit of part of it as well, a big part of it actually at international level.
What about England? What was the opportunity or the emotional levers there with England?
Yeah, no, I've spent a fair bit of time on this. I actually spoke to the bloke who wrote the culture book for New Zealand, Owen Eastwood, a bright guy, really wrote the book on the All Blacks. And we're trying to find a theme through England. They're always found with England, and I reckon it's the opposite of the Ashes tour now. They're at their best when they're really tough, under the pump a bit, and really go at the opposition with a very simple, hard physical plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I reckon the way they play cricket now is almost the opposite to how they want to play cricket. Yeah, all the young guys like it because it's easy, because there's no accountability, but it doesn't get the best out of them. I reckon that's a really interesting case study, the English cricket team at the moment.
We're not talking rugby, we're building it. Rugby unity.
Yeah. Well, I've read something about that over the weekend and the comparison to the Strausses and the Cooks of the world, the Athertons, where they were, as you say, grinders.
Gritty, mate.
And they'd work hard. Yeah, exactly. And they wouldn't give their wicket away.
Yeah.
That'd make you get you out, as opposed to
Jeff
now.
Boycott, like he never play the ball. Like he just leave it. And they're averaging like one run and over. Now they're trying to be now they're trying to hit 6 runs and over. So it's either a legacy of the other forms of cricket, or anyway. We'll be hearing more about that.
Yeah, it's not going so well for them at the moment. Eddie, go on.
Oh, I just reckon, you look at Joe Root, who's from Yorkshire, right? Which has generally been the home of English cricket. Tough, uncompromising, don't give your wicket away. And he's up the other end. He's seeing these guys just like literally play as though there's no tomorrow. Some of them there will be no tomorrow if they keep going.
Yeah, very true. And what about Japan, Eddie? How do you work with Japan as contrast? So there's South Africa, there's Australia, there's England. How's Japan? Where is it with Japan?
Yeah, pride's a big part. You have a look at Japan's history. We're in Oita at the moment, which is down in Kyushu, and that's where the first foreigners came. And not far away is Nagasaki, where they actually, they were one of the few countries that stopped the foreigners coming in. And they actually built a man-made island off Nagasaki to house the foreigners, which were Dutch. So they've always had this fight about them. Think about World War II, where they probably made a few mistakes, but then they were able to rebuild themselves after World War II into the second biggest economy in the world. So they've had this propensity to be under extreme pressure. They find the best of themselves, and I think they like to be seen as a bit of underdogs with that. Not overtly confident, but if you can pull that really inner fight out of them, you get a bit more out of them. And we're starting to see that a little bit with this group we've got now.
Yeah, I definitely think you can see that in this Japanese team that you're developing, that they're starting to enjoy that fight and the toughness of the game. So looking forward to them continuing to improve. But the next question is from @YoungDaz on TikTok.
One, mate. They should get a 5-star. That's a good question.
Well, this is the thing, the third voice, people out there. So I encourage you all, send through the questions, send through the comments, because this helps to make this program as interesting as it is. And I got pulled up over the weekend, actually, someone saying how much they enjoy the contributions from the audience. So please keep them coming. So anyway, @YoungDaz on TikTok, I've watched rugby for 35 years and never sat through a full Six Nations match. Okay. From the eye test alone, the rugby just doesn't look truly top tier. Well, I don't know about that, but anyway, they always step up against Southern Hemisphere teams, but that's the point. When they face each other, it often feels like Tier 2 rugby, and it takes a Southern Hemisphere opponent to bring out a real top Tier 1 performance. Eddie Jones, you coached in Six Nations. Do you think that's a fair observation, or is that a little harsh?
Well, I think I might have mentioned last time, I actually, when I wasn't involved in Six Nations, I probably felt the same as Daz, so I share his emotions. But having, and I said it last time, having been involved in it, I admire the competition. Like, it's a seriously tough, intense competition, and the pressure on the players to perform is massively high. Yeah, it's like it's equivalent of Australia New Zealand Bledisloe Cup. So yeah, Daz, I think you better have another look at the games a bit more closely, mate.
So Eddie, this week, sorry, Link, just before we come to that, Eddie, there's only one break this year, not two. How much is that going to impact the 2026 Six Nations?
Well, I think it just advantages the team with more depth in their squad. It'll help England, potentially France and Ireland to a lesser extent, and Wales and Scotland and Italy will find that a bit more difficult because that the week's breaking. You can get a player that's been a little bit injured in that previous game, and you got 2 weeks to recover. Now only having a week to recover will affect selection a little bit.
Sorry, Ewen McKenzie, getting back to your observation about whether or not you think Six Nations is second tier and we only see the best of the Six Nations teams when they play against their Southern Hemisphere opponents.
Yeah, being a Victorian, I grew up on the Five Nations as it was then, and we used to get up and watch it at night, and some of the greats of the game were running around in forwards and backs. The Wales and the English team at the time, and Scotland, they had great players. So I don't agree with that at all. I think it's always been a really good tournament. It's been, obviously adding Italy's, you could question that, but I think that's starting to pay off now. It's taken some time, but they're certainly competitive. So I disagree with him completely that it's some second-rate thing. I think that's not the case at all. We just don't. I've been watching it since I was 15, and I grew up on that because when you're in Victoria, the only games that beam into on television would be those games in the middle of the night. You'd get nothing else from Australian rugby at that time. So I grew up on all that, and I read all the autobiographies of all the great players at the time, the Andy Irvins, the Graham Prices. There's Phil Banner. There's so many good players from that era. So I just disagree. I think that's not the case.
Okay, the next question from Instagram is Hyle Williams, and he says, I think the timing of the World Cup plays a part, and that's in the fact that most it's been won by Southern Hemisphere teams. It suits Southern Hemisphere as their preparation is rehearsed and peaks for the same time every year. Six Nations teams prep to peak for springtime Six Nations and then have to change the model every 4 years. I would imagine Northern Hemisphere teams would do better if the World Cup was in March or April. Eddie Jones, what do you think about that?
Well, it's what I said about Ireland, mate. 100%. So they're going to change.
Yep.
Make the World Cup more important, change your preparation. It's pretty easy. Don't make excuses. Like we got England right for the World Cup in 2019, mate. They were flying. We changed the prep. We undervalued the Six Nations that year, took a risk and did it. Just got to order coffee. Tall hot dog here. Hey.
Well.
Oh, listen to that.
That's about the end of the Japanese.
Ewen McKenzie, your thoughts? What do you think about that? Has that got the reason? Has Eddie Jones got it right there? That
Eddie's right. Eddie's right.
You just got to prioritise.
That's exactly right. There's nothing else to say. You just got to prioritise, and it is what it is. And every year's got its challenges. Now we've got the Nations Cup. Everyone's going to have to work out the preparation for that too. So there's just different. That's the way it is, So
okay, the next question is from Sidark from YouTube. Everyone seems to be underestimating Zimbabwe. They are the shock factor in that group. These guys grow up playing rugby in top schools in Zim. They are the African Rugby Championships after a brutal tournament that upset Namibia, another strong African side. They don't have the same experience as South Africa, but they will bring it on. This World Cup will be their announcement. Ewen McKenzie, Zimbabwe. Do you expect the African champions to make a statement at Rugby World Cup 2027?
Well, I'm just having a look at the England, Wales, Tonga, Zimbabwe. I mean, good luck. I hope they do. That'll be that'd be great. And you always like to think there's going to be one or two stories of where someone emerges, and we've seen that in pretty much every World Cup. And so if it's Zimbabwe, that'd be terrific. I'd like to think Tonga's going to be competitive too. So if that's the case, that could be a very competitive pool with Wales and England. England will obviously be looking up the ladder, but you've got to get through your pool first. So I guess theoretically you're right about Zimbabwe, but I'm not as convinced. But let's wait and see.
Eddie Jones, have you had much exposure to African rugby outside of South Africa? Do you stay across it? Have you been over there to coach? Are you aware of the strength of the Zimbabwe team?
Just a couple of things, I reckon. Firstly, their first 20 minutes in every World Cup game is going to be worth watching, I reckon, because they will rip in. But I don't think their last 20 is going to be too flash. So if you're going to Zimbabwe, make sure you don't get in the beer line, get stuck in the beer line, get out and watch the first 20. I went there with Jake White. We did a coaching seminar at Falcons College in Bulawayo.
Bulawayo.
It was Bulawayo. It was one of the best cultural experiences. I remember we stayed in this hotel, Bunratty Castle, I think its name was. It had like dead animals everywhere. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought this gorilla was coming after me. And we had a great time. And the stories, at that stage, the country was in a pretty state of disrepair. They had 3,000% inflation. Yeah, you got bills that were worth like 10 million Zimbabwe dollars, which is basically buy you a cup of coffee, in the morning, and then in the afternoon only buy you half a cup of coffee. And talking to the parents there who've experienced, difficult situations with farm invasion, it was a really great cultural experience. But, they do produce good, tough players, and he's right. Zydak, whatever his name is right. They'll rip in, but maybe not for too many minutes.
Okay, very good. Well, that's something to look forward to. And we do have a few more questions here at AD2040, at Derek Chaplin and William O'Brien. They asked questions about the draw, but we covered those earlier and the questions that have been asked in that earlier discussion. So thank you, William O'Brien, Derek Chaplin and AD2040 for your questions about the World Cup draw. So over the weekend, some results. The Sevens in Cape Town. Men's, South Africa 21 defeated Argentina 19, and the women's, Australia 26 defeated New Zealand 12, and it's the beginning of the European Cup, both the Challenge Cup and the Champions Cup. Eddie Jones, it would seem at the moment that European rugby, the teams, like players being rested, they're not quite at full strength. The bigger squads trying to mix and match. What's your thoughts about the importance of it when you think of Champions League in football and it being really the pinnacle tournament? Rugby at the moment, that European rugby seems a little challenged around having players available for selection, trying to fit all the tournaments in, trying to have all the best players available. It would seem that the European Championship and the Challenge Cup at the moment would just be that considered at that tier below by the clubs who are competing. Is that fair observation?
Well, the Challenge Cup's always been a bit of how would you say it, a difficult competition that, the English clubs generally saw as an opportunity to get promoted. The French clubs most of those clubs are at the bottom of the top 14 and they don't give a hoot about the Challenge Cup, so they put in their B team right from the start. The Champions League or Champions Cup is a great competition. And I think, it really comes into its own when it gets down to the last 8, and the quality of competition in that in that particular competition is high. It's as close to Test rugby as you get. But the Challenge Cup's always been a difficult one.
Yeah. Ewen McKenzie,
Well,
someone who's coached in Europe.
Yeah, I coached in the European Cup, as it was then, but which is now the equivalent of the Champions Cup. And Eddie's right. The Challenge Cup is sort of like the bottom ends of the league, so it's it's there. It's something you got to go through, but there's no focus on it really, unless you suddenly come into the sort of the chance to win a trophy or something like that for promotion reasons. It becomes valuable later on, but we won't know that until next year, really. So at this point in time, the games tend to go home and away. And I'm looking now. I'm back on the Champions Cup, which is obviously the elite ends of the competitions. If you look at all the results, there's only they're all solid home wins. So they're all sort of 40-point wins basically. The only team winning away was Bordeaux, won away, and I think the other one was Northampton won away. So that's that was a close game. All the other games are all sort of it's early days. But having coached in it, we played against Ulster and Harlequins. I remember I was the stud front say, and we had to go up to Ulster, and we won there. And we played a fantastic game against Harlequins in London, and that went into sort of extra time. It was an amazing game, but they won. But they have to come out, and you got to play them. So it does go home and away to some extent. We won in Ulster, so we put ourselves in a chance. But in the end, we got pipped. So I think it's quite a good competition. The problem is that you play a couple of rounds, then it goes, and you play another couple of rounds after the Six Nations, and then you get into the finals. So it's sort of broken up. So it does get lost a little bit if you're just a casual observer. But if you're playing in it, the rest of the competition sort of goes on hold. The club competition goes on hold while it's being played. So you can freshen players up and whatever. So I'm sure clubs will be doing that as well.
All right. So just some other news from around the game. Rugby Europe and Rugby Asia are both looking for CEOs. So if you're a businessman out there and you feel like you'd like to get involved in rugby administration, both Rugby Europe and Rugby Asia are advertising for CEOs. So maybe something to have a look at. And I think big news from across in New Zealand, Mark Robinson, the CEO of New Zealand Rugby, who's been there for the last 6 years, has left his position now after 6 years. I know he's very influential, not only in New Zealand Rugby, at World Rugby level as well. But congratulations to him on his service to the game and everything that he's done. And I am hoping that I might be able to get him onto Rugby Unity to have a conversation to get his views on how does he think that we can all work to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. And I did mention earlier that Brett Robinson, I did speak to him after the draw last week, and he is going to come on to the program. So Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie, get your questions ready. And indeed, the third voice, get yourselves ready. If you would like to ask Brett Robinson any question, make sure that they're available, and we will ask them. The chairman at the end of probably the first 12 months, give Robbo an opportunity to look back and to look forward, and for us to discuss the many issues that are pertinent to our mission of helping to secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. Now, just another interesting, it's a bit of a fun thing, but last week, and many people would know this from their own use of Spotify, but there's a thing called the Spotify Wrap. that they do at the end of every year. So every individual, every organisation who uses Spotify, they come up with this very neat marketing tool where they wrap all of your statistics together. And they did one we have one for Rugby Unity. So we are the top 10 show for 925 fans. We're the top 5 show for 528 fans. And the number 1 show for 136 fans. So 136 people out there, you are our super fans. You know who you are, so a very big thanks. The top artists who our fans listen to are Zach Bryan, Taylor Swift, Luke Combs, Oasis, and number 5, The Wiggles. So the top audio books for our fans are The Trading Game from Gary Stevenson, The Good, the Bad and the Rugby Unleashed, Obsessed, the autobiography of Johnny Sexton, and Together We Roared, Steve Williams and Evan Priest, and that's about golf, and The Storm Within, Andrew Webster, which was written about Cameron Smith, the great NRL player. And the top podcasts that our fans listen to, the Joe Rogan Experience, the Rugby Pod, Kickoffs and Kick-Ons, For the Love of Rugby, and The Rest is History. So there you go. So obviously listening to lots of rugby podcasts, and it's a great thing that all of those other podcasts are out there doing and promoting our great game. Now, some Rugby 2027 fun facts. This will be the first time the Wallabies and All Blacks have ever competed in a World Cup pool against each other. Italy have played at every men's Rugby World Cup. France and Samoa have never met at a Rugby World Cup before. 2027 will be the first time. Zimbabwe will return for the first time since Rugby World Cup 1991 when they face England for the first time in Test rugby. Portugal's match against Uruguay will be their first against a team from the Americas. And Ireland and Scotland are together in the same pool for the 3rd consecutive Men's Rugby World Cup. Ireland defeated Scotland at both Japan 2019 and Ireland 2023. So there you go, some fun facts about 2027 Rugby World Cup. So there we go. So yes, Brett Robinson. We'll have an extended program with Brett Robinson, and I'll make sure that Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie have done their homework and they're ready to put him in the hot seat because he's very keen to discuss everything that's going on about the game, both on and off the field, consistent with Rugby Unity's mission to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. Now, we'll let Eddie Jones get on with his busy day, and Ewen McKenzie. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us once again. And a big thanks to you, the audience, as always, the third voice. Very grateful for your ongoing continued support, whether it be on TikTok, Apple, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, wherever it is that you're consuming this content. We're very grateful for your support through what has been a really fascinating experiment. We started this from a standing start about 8 months ago, 7.5 months ago, and have now built something that is very useful, I think, for the game of rugby. And that comes from the third voice and the support that you've given us, plus the great expertise and knowledge of our two great experts in Ewen McKenzie and Eddie Jones. But there we go. So a big thanks to everybody, really, as we start to close in on Christmas. And we'll keep talking rugby for the next couple of weeks as we get towards that Christmas. But please, for the moment, be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.